She woke up before the alarm, like she always did. The city outside her high-rise window was still quiet, wrapped in early morning gray. From this height, everything looked small, calm, controlled. That was how she liked it. She moved through her apartment with practiced ease. Shower, coffee, emails already waiting on her phone. Messages from board members, assistants, investors in different time zones. Every minute of her day had a purpose. Every action had a result. This was a world she understood. In the middle of all that order was her son. He sat at the kitchen table, feet not touching the floor, hands resting beside a bowl of cereal he hadn't touched. His eyes followed the slow movement of sunlight across the wall. He didn't look at her. He didn't speak. He never did. She placed a cup of juice near him and waited, just for a second, like she sometimes did. Maybe today. Maybe something small. A sound. A word. A glance. Nothing. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest and pushed it down. She had learned how to do that well. Feelings could wait. Meetings could not. Her son had doctors. The best ones. Therapists. Specialists. Reports with careful words and soft warnings. They talked about patience. About timelines. About not forcing things. They always said the same thing in different ways. She nodded in those offices. She signed checks. She scheduled sessions. And then she went back to work. She told herself she was doing everything right. Providing. Protecting. Giving him every possible chance. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and her phone finally stopped buzzing, the doubt always came. She wondered if he was silent because she had been. That morning was different. It was a Saturday. No meetings. No flights. No speeches. Just empty space on her calendar, which felt strange and uncomfortable. She looked at her son again. He was still staring at the wall, lost in his own quiet world. "We're going out," she said gently, even though she knew he wouldn't answer. She always spoke to him anyway. She refused to let silence win completely. The park was only a few blocks away. She had passed it many times in her car, but rarely stopped. It was messy, unplanned, full of noise and people who didn't follow rules. Still, something pulled her there. They walked side by side. She slowed her pace to match his small steps. Around them, the city felt softer than usual. Dogs tugged on leashes. A street musician played a slow tune. Parents laughed, tired but real laughter, not the polite kind she used at events. When they reached the park, she hesitated at the entrance. Children ran past them, shouting, falling, getting back up. The sounds hit her all at once. It was overwhelming. Her son didn't react. He just stood there, taking it all in. She guided him to a bench and sat down. For a moment, she considered leaving. This was a mistake, she thought. Too much stimulation. Too many eyes. But then she noticed something. Most people weren't staring. They were busy. Living. Arguing with toddlers, chasing balls, pushing swings. The world wasn't focused on her, or her son. It kept moving. That realization surprised her more than she expected. She watched her son carefully. His fingers tapped lightly against the bench. His eyes followed a group of pigeons as they scattered and came back together. There was curiosity there. Quiet but real. She felt a small ache in her chest. How many moments like this had she missed? She reached for her phone out of habit, then stopped. For once, there was nothing urgent waiting. The company would survive an afternoon without her. The world would not fall apart. She stayed. Time passed slowly. She didn't know how long. Long enough for her shoulders to relax. Long enough for her breathing to change. Then she noticed someone nearby. A man sat on the grass a short distance away. Shoes kicked off, sleeves rolled up. A small child played beside him, stacking sticks and leaves into uneven piles. The man didn't correct her. He didn't guide her hands. He just watched, smiling softly, like there was nowhere else he needed to be. Something about that bothered her. Not because he was doing anything wrong, but because it looked so easy. The child knocked over a pile and laughed. The sound was loud and free. The man laughed too, not trying to quiet her, not checking his phone. Just there, her son noticed him as well. His tapping fingers stopped. His body leaned forward slightly, almost without him realizing it. She held her breath. The man didn't rush over. He didn't point. He didn't ask questions. He just spoke to his child in a calm, steady voice, describing what she was doing like it mattered. Her son watched. Closely, the woman felt something shift inside her, a feeling she wasn't used to. Not fear, not control. Hope scared her more than anything else. She told herself not to expect anything. She had learned that lesson the hard way. Expectations only made disappointment sharper. Still, she couldn't look away. The afternoon sun climbed higher. The park grew warmer. The sounds blended into a steady hum of life. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about tomorrow. She was just there. And she had no idea that this ordinary day, in this ordinary park, was quietly setting the stage for something that would change her forever. She returned to the park the next afternoon. She told herself it was for her son. He had seemed calmer there, more aware, less distant. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. Something unfinished from the day before. Something she couldn't name. The park looked different in daylight. Brighter, louder. Children's voices rose and fell like waves. The smell of grass and street food filled the air. Life moved freely here without schedules or meetings. Her son walked beside her, his steps slow and steady. He didn't hold her hand, but he stayed close. That alone felt like progress. She chose the same bench as before. At first, nothing happened. She sat. He sat. Silence settled between them, familiar and heavy. She fought the urge to fill it with words, instructions, distractions. She had spent years trying to guide him towards something. Speech, response, connection. Maybe she had been pushing too hard. She watched him instead. He studied everything. The way a ball bounced unevenly on the grass. The way a dog's ears moved when it heard its name. The way shadows shifted under the trees. He noticed details she had spent her whole life ignoring. Then she saw him. The same man from yesterday. He was sitting on the ground again, this time closer. His child ran ahead of him, chasing bubbles blown by another parent nearby. He didn't shout warnings. He didn't pull her back. He stayed alert but calm, ready without hovering. The woman felt her shoulders tense. She didn't understand why this man affected her so much. She had seen countless parents before, but something about him felt different, grounded, unrushed. Her son noticed too. His head turned slightly. His eyes followed the child's movements. When the child tripped and fell, her son flinched. When the man helped the child up and brushed dirt from her knees without panic, her son relaxed. The woman swallowed. She realized how often her own reactions had been sharp, controlled, fear hidden behind calm words. She had been protecting her son, she told herself. But maybe she had also been showing him the world was something to be careful of. The man spoke to his child, not correcting, not teaching, just talking. Simple words. Soft tone. No pressure. The woman felt an uncomfortable truth settle in her chest. She had spent years talking about her son. To doctors. To teachers. To assistants. Rarely to him like this. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She ignored it. Minutes passed. Then more. Something unexpected happened. The child wandered closer to the bench. She stopped a few steps away and stared openly at the boy. Not with judgment, with curiosity. The woman stiffened. She was used to this moment. The stares. The questions. The awkward apologies. She prepared herself. But the child just smiled and held out a small plastic figure, worn and scratched from use. "Want?" the child asked, voice bright. The woman inhaled sharply. Her son froze. She watched him carefully. His body went still, like a deer sensing danger. She almost stepped in, ready to protect him from the pressure, the expectation. But the man's voice stopped her. "It's okay," he said gently, not to her son, but to his child. "You can put it down." The child placed a toy on the ground between them and backed away, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. No demand. No waiting. The man didn't look at the boy. He didn't watch for a reaction. He turned his attention back to his child, continuing their quiet conversation about bubbles and grass and clouds. The woman felt something loosen inside her. Her son stared at the toy. Seconds passed. Long seconds. Then, slowly, he leaned forward. His hand hovered over the toy. He didn't pick it up. He just touched it lightly, like he was checking if it was real. The woman's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure others could hear it. She stayed still, afraid to break the moment. Her son's fingers closed around the toy. He lifted it, turning it over in his hands. His focus narrowed. The world around him faded. The woman felt tears sting her eyes. This wasn't new behavior exactly. He had interacted with objects before, but this felt different. Shared, connected. She looked at the man. He had noticed. She could tell. But he didn't smile or nod or react. He didn't turn it into a moment. He let it be. That was when she understood something important. He wasn't trying to change anything. He was just creating space. After a while, the child came back, pointing at the toy. "That one funny," she said. Her son didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either. The woman held her breath. The man crouched down beside his child. "Yeah," he said softly. "It is." He glanced briefly at the boy, then away again. No pressure, no expectation. The woman felt her chest tighten. She wanted to ask him something, anything, how he knew to act this way, how he stayed so calm. But she stayed quiet. They shared the park for another hour. No introductions, no small talk, just parallel lives moving close enough to touch. When it was time to leave, the woman stood and gently touched her son's shoulder. "We're going home," she said. He didn't protest. He didn't react. But he didn't drop the toy either. She looked around, searching for the man. He was watching his child climb a small hill, arms outstretched like she was flying. He noticed the woman's glance and met her eyes for a brief moment. There was no judgment there, no pride, just understanding. She nodded. A simple, silent thank you. He nodded back. That night, after her son fell asleep, she sat alone in the living room. The city lights blinked outside the window. Her phone lay face down on the table, forgotten. She thought about the park, the man, the way nothing had been forced. She realized how tired she was. Not from work, from trying to control everything. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if the answer wasn't something she could buy, schedule, or command. Maybe it was something quieter. Maybe it had been waiting for her all along, in a place she had never slowed down enough to notice. And tomorrow, she knew she would go back to the park again. The next day, she arrived at the park earlier than usual. The air was cool, and the grass was still damp. Fewer people were around. The quiet felt gentle, not empty. She liked it this way. It gave her time to think, even though she wasn't sure what she was thinking about. Her son walked beside her, holding the small toy from the day before. He hadn't let go of it all night. He slept with it in his hand, fingers wrapped tightly, as if it might disappear if he loosened his grip. She didn't take it away. They sat on the bench again. Same spot, same view. She tried not to look around too much, but she couldn't help it. Part of her was searching. He wasn't there yet. She felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. She told herself it didn't matter. This wasn't about anyone else. This was about her son. Still, she waited. Her son stared ahead, swinging his legs slightly. The toy rested in his lap. Every so often, he touched it just to make sure it was still there. She watched him, studying every small movement like it was something fragile. Then she heard a voice behind her. Morning. It was calm, simple. She turned. The man stood a few steps away, holding a paper cup. His child was nearby, crouched down, examining ants moving across the ground. Morning, she replied. Her voice sounded stiff. She wasn't used to talking to strangers without purpose. They stood there for a moment, unsure. Then he spoke again. Nice day. She nodded. Yeah. Another pause. She almost laughed at how awkward it felt. She handled rooms full of people without breaking a sweat. Negotiations worth millions. Yet here she was, struggling with small talk in a park. He didn't seem bothered by the silence. He sat on the grass again, not too far from the bench. Close enough, but not invading space. His child followed, humming softly. Her son noticed. His body shifted slightly. Not away, toward. She felt her heart beat faster. The man didn't look at him right away. He focused on his child, helping her roll a small ball back and forth. The sound of the ball against the ground was soft and steady. Her son watched. The man began talking, not loudly, not directly to anyone in particular. "This ball always rolls funny," he said. "Never goes straight." The words floated through the air, light and easy. Her son's fingers tightened around the toy. The man rolled the ball again. It curved and stopped near the bench. "Well," the man said quietly, "I guess it likes it there." He didn't reach for it. Her son stared at the ball. The woman held her breath. Seconds passed. Her son leaned forward. Slowly, carefully, he picked up the ball and held it. The man didn't react. He didn't say thank you. He didn't smile in a way that made it a big deal. He just continued, "That's okay. We can wait." The woman felt something rise in her chest, a mix of fear and hope. She had felt this before, many times, moments that seemed promising, only to fall apart. She didn't want to believe. Her son rolled the ball back. It wasn't perfect. It barely made it halfway, but it moved. The man nodded, still calm. It never goes where you think it will. Her son watched the ball stop. Then he looked up, not at the man, at her. Their eyes met. It happened so quickly she almost missed it. Her breath caught. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She had learned that sudden reactions could shatter fragile moments. The man's child clapped her hands. Again. The man rolled the ball back toward the bench. This time, her son didn't hesitate. He rolled it back faster. A small sound escaped his mouth. It wasn't a word. It wasn't clear, but it was something. The woman froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her ears rang. The world narrowed to that single sound. She stared at her son, afraid to blink. He made the sound again, softer this time, almost like he was testing it. Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to cry out. The man noticed then. He looked at the boy, really looked at him, not with surprise, not with excitement, with respect. He didn't say anything. He just rolled the ball again. The woman felt her hands shake. She placed them flat on the bench, grounding herself. This wasn't happening, she told herself. Or maybe it was, and she was too scared to believe it. Her son rolled the ball back once more. Another sound, slightly clearer. The woman whispered his name, without thinking. He didn't respond to the name, but he didn't shut down either. The man finally spoke, his voice gentle. "You don't have to talk," he said, not looking directly at the boy. "Rolling is fine." The woman's chest tightened. She realized how many times she had waited for words, how many times she had measured progress by sounds and syllables. She had forgotten that connection came first. Her son continued rolling the ball, back and forth, back and forth. Each time, the sound came easier. Still not words, still small, but real. Other people passed by. None of them noticed anything unusual. To them, it was just a child playing. To her, it was everything. Eventually, the ball rolled away too far and stopped. Her son didn't chase it. He sat still, breathing a little faster. The man stood up slowly and retrieved the ball. He placed it gently near the boy, then stepped back. "Thank you," he said quietly. The woman finally found her voice. I don't know what just happened." Her voice shook. The man shrugged lightly. "Nothing special." She looked at him, disbelief in her eyes. "He doesn't do that." The man nodded. "I figured." She waited for advice. Instructions. Techniques. None came. "He decides when," the man said simply. "We just make room." Tears spilled down her face. She didn't wipe them away. For once, she didn't care how she looked. Her son picked up the ball again. He didn't roll it this time. He just held it like the toy figure. She reached out and placed her hand near his, not touching. He didn't pull away. They stayed like that for a long time. No one spoke. No one rushed. When it was time to leave, the woman felt different. Lighter, shaken, changed. As they walked away, her son made the sound again. Soft, uneven. She smiled through tears. She didn't know what the future held, She didn't know if word would come tomorrow, or next year, or ever. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the silence. Because now, she understood it wasn't empty. It was waiting. She didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound again. Small, unclear, but real. It echoed in her chest, soft and stubborn, refuse and fade like all the false hopes before it. By morning, she felt exhausted and wide awake at the same time. Her son sat on the floor, lining up his toys in a careful row. The small ball rested beside him. He rolled a few inches, then stopped it with his hand. He didn't make a sound this time, but something about him felt different, more present. She watched from the doorway, afraid that if she stepped closer, the moment would break. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. For the first time in years, she didn't rush to check messages. The company could wait. The world could wait. Her mind kept returning to the man at the park, to his calm voice, to the way he didn't rush or celebrate or label what happened. He hadn't treated it like a miracle or a problem to solve. He had treated it like life. She realized how desperate she had been for answers, for formulas, for steps to follow. She had built her entire career on finding solutions. But her son wasn't a system. He wasn't a project. He was a person. That afternoon, she took him back to the park. This time, she didn't choose the bench right away. She let him lead. He walked slowly, stopping often, drawn by things most people walk past. A leaf caught in the wind, a crack in the pavement, the way light filtered through branches. She followed. The man was already there. He sat on the grass, shoes off again, his child beside him drawing lines in the dirt with a stick. When he saw her, he gave a small nod. Nothing more. She felt oddly nervous. They settled nearby, not too close. Her son sat down on the ground this time, instead of the bench. That alone felt like a quiet victory. The man spoke to his child, but his words drifted over naturally. "Careful," he said softly. "That stick's sharp." No raised voice. No fear. His child nodded and adjusted her grip. The woman watched, thinking about how often she had used warnings, how often her words had carried tension. She didn't even notice anymore. After a while, she couldn't hold it in. "How do you do that?" she asked. Her voice surprised her. It sounded raw. The man looked up. "Do what?" She gestured vaguely. "Be so calm." He smiled slightly. Not amused, not proud, just tired. "I wasn't always," he said. She waited. He brushed dirt from his hands and sat back. "I learned the hard way," he continued. "You can't rush someone into being ready." She swallowed. "I've tried everything." "I know," he said gently. That simple sentence broke something inside her. She told him things she hadn't planned to say. About specialists. About reports filled with words that sounded kind but felt heavy. About nights spent wondering what she had done wrong. She didn't talk about money or titles or success. None of that mattered here. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, she felt exposed. Empty. He nodded slowly. "People mean well," he said, "but sometimes they focus so much on what a child isn't doing. They forget to see what they're doing." She looked at her son. He sat nearby, rolling the ball back and forth between his hands. Quiet, focused, calm. "He notices everything," the man continued. "That's not nothing." Tears filled her eyes again. She was getting tired of crying. But she didn't stop them anymore. "I thought I was helping him by giving him everything," she said. "The best care, the best chances." "You were," the man said. "But care isn't just action. Sometimes it's presence." That word hit her hard. Presence. She had been physically near her son for years, but her mind had often been elsewhere. Meetings, calls, problems waiting to be solved. She felt ashamed, then angry at herself. Then something softer followed. Understanding. They sat in silence for a while. The man's child ran off to the slide. He watched her carefully but didn't hover. The woman noticed how he trusted the world just enough. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "You get better at listening," he said, "and you stop measuring progress by other people's timelines." She exhaled slowly. Her son made a small sound beside her. Not the same one as yesterday. Different. Almost like a hum. She froze. The man didn't react. She didn't either. They let it pass naturally, like a breeze. Later that evening, back at home, she made a decision. She opened her laptop, not for work, but to write an email. It was short, clear, honest. She would be stepping back. Not forever, but enough. She expected fear to rush in. It didn't. Instead, she felt relief. Days turned into weeks. She kept going to park. Sometimes a man was there. Sometimes he wasn't. When he was, they talked a little. Sometimes about parenting. Sometimes about nothing at all. There was no pressure. No plan. At home, she changed too. She stopped filling silence with questions. She stopped pushing activities meant to help. She followed her son's lead more. Sat with him on the floor. Watched what he watched. Some days were hard. He still didn't speak. Some days he withdrew and fear crept back in. But she remembered the ball, the sound, the way it happened when no one was trying to make it happen. One evening, as they sat together, her son looked at her and made the sound again, slightly longer this time. She smiled. "I hear you," she said softly. He didn't repeat it. That was okay. She no longer felt like time was running out. At the park one afternoon, she thanked the man. "For what?" he asked. "For reminding me," she said, "that my son isn't broken." He shook his head. He never was. She watched her son sit in the grass, calm and curious, alive in his own way. For the first time, she wasn't chasing a future she couldn't control. She was here, and it was enough. The change did not come all at once. There was no big moment where everything suddenly became perfect. No clear finish line. Life did not work that way, and she had finally stopped expecting it to. Instead, change came quietly. It showed up in small mornings when she no longer checked her phone first thing, in slow breakfasts where she sat across from her son and waited, not for words, but for presence, in afternoons that were no longer rushed. She still worked. She still led, but her world no longer revolved only around deadlines and results. There were empty spaces now, and she protected them carefully. Her son noticed. He stayed close to her more often. Not always, but enough for her to see the difference. He would sit near her on the couch, leaning slightly in her direction. Sometimes his hand brushed hers. Sometimes it stayed there. She learned not to rush those moments. The park remained part of their routine. Some days they stayed for hours. Other days they left after 10 minutes. She stopped measuring success by time spent or reactions gained. She let each visit be what it was. The man was there less often now. His schedule had changed. When he did come, they exchanged smiles and a few words. Nothing deep, nothing forced. They didn't need more. Her son still carried the small toy and the ball. They had become familiar objects, anchors in a world that often felt too loud. One afternoon, while sitting on the grass, something happened that caught her off guard. Her son laughed. It was soft, short, almost like a breath that turned into sound by accident. She froze. Not because she was afraid this time, but because she didn't want to scare it away. She didn't clap. She didn't call anyone. She didn't even smile right away. She simply looked at him. He laughed again, just as quietly, while watching a dog chase his tail nearby. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed calm. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized something important. She wasn't waiting for her son to become someone else anymore. She was finally seeing who he already was. Weeks passed. Her son began making more sounds. Not words, not sentences, just small expressions. Hums, soft noises. Each one came without warning and left just as easily. She welcomed them without expectation. Some days, there were none at all, and that was okay. One evening, while sitting together on the floor, she rolled the ball toward him. He rolled it back, slowly, carefully. She rolled it again. As it reached her, she heard it. Ball. It wasn't clear. It wasn't perfect, but it was unmistakable. She felt the air leave her lungs. Her hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "Yeah," she said softly. "Ball." He didn't repeat it. He didn't look at her. He just rolled it again. She pressed her lips together, tears streaming silently down her face. Later, when she told a therapist about it, the therapist smiled and spoke gently about progress and milestones. She nodded politely, but inside, she knew the truth. This didn't happen because of charts or plans. It happened because someone had finally stopped trying to fix him. The park slowly became a place of memory rather than need. They still went, but not every day. Life expanded again, just differently than before. One afternoon, while watching her son play quietly, she realized how much he had changed too. She no longer felt the urge to explain him to strangers, or to defend him, or to rush his growth to make others comfortable. She trusted him, and she trusted herself. Months later, on a warm afternoon, they ran into the man again after a long time. His child had grown taller, louder, more confident. They talked briefly. "He's doing well," the man said, glancing at the boy. She nodded. "We both are." There was understanding in his eyes. No pride, no credit, just shared truth. When it was time to leave, her son surprised her again. He tugged lightly on her sleeve. She looked down. "Yes." He looked at the man, then back at her. "Bye," he said. The word was quiet, uneven, but clear enough. The world seemed to pause. The man smiled, his eyes soft. "Bye," he replied. She felt her knees weaken. Her son didn't say anything else. He didn't repeat it. He took her hand and walked away like nothing extraordinary had happened. She followed, heart pounding, tears blurring her vision. That night, as she tucked him into bed, she kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't answer, but he smiled, and that was enough. Years later, when people asked her what changed everything, she didn't talk about success or sacrifice or lessons learned. She talked about a park, about slowing down, about learning that silence isn't empty. Sometimes, it's full of things waiting to be heard. And the greatest change of all wasn't that her son found his voice. It was that she finally learned how to listen,